The restaurant was crowded that evening, more than usual, buzzing with the clatter of plates and the low hum of conversation that swirled around the polished oak tables. The warm, golden light of the chandeliers reflected off crystal glasses and silver cutlery, casting small glimmers across the polished marble floors. Waiters moved briskly, balancing trays loaded with steaming dishes, careful not to spill a drop, their shoes squeaking softly on the smooth surface as they navigated between tables crowded with guests. The smell of freshly baked bread mingled with the aroma of sizzling steaks and roasted vegetables, creating an intoxicating mix that made the mouth water even for those too polite to show it. At the far end of the restaurant, near the window, sat a young boy. He was alone, seated in a wheelchair, his small frame swallowed by the leather seat. His brown hair was slightly unkempt, brushing against his forehead, and his large dark eyes darted nervously around the room. He clutched the edge of the table as if it were a lifeline, his fingers trembling slightly. The boy's clothes were neat but modest, nothing like the designer suits and silk dresses that surrounded him, and in that world of opulence, he seemed fragile, almost invisible. And yet, he was far from invisible to one man. A wealthy, middle-aged man with sharp features, a tailored suit, and a gold watch that caught the light with every movement, was staring directly at him. The millionaire laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that carried over the ambient noise, cutting through conversations and causing a few heads to turn. He gestured with his hand, exaggeratedly, pointing toward the boy. "Look at him," he said, chuckling. "Can you believe this? He looks like he doesn't even know how to eat properly." His laugh echoed again, loud and arrogant, drawing uncomfortable glances from nearby patrons. The boy did not respond. He lowered his gaze to the table, focusing on the white linen cloth beneath his hands. The laughter hurt more than words could, each mocking note reverberating through his chest like a drumbeat of humiliation. But instead of crying or replying, he remained silent. His lips pressed together, a faint trembling that no one could see unless they were paying very close attention. Every eye that fell on him seemed to magnify his shame, and yet, in that silent suffering, something inside the boy began to harden. Nearby, a young waitress watched the scene unfold. She had been serving tables for years and had seen plenty of rudeness, but this was different. Her chest tightened as she observed the millionaire leaning toward the boy, laughing cruelly. The sight was unbearable, and her hands instinctively clutched the order pad against her chest, knuckles white. She wanted to intervene, to say something, anything, but the words stuck in her throat. She knew that once she spoke, the tension would erupt into confrontation, and the consequences might fall on her. So she stood frozen, a silent witness to the injustice. Meanwhile, other patrons began to take notice. Some frowned, shaking their heads in disapproval. Others simply looked away, pretending not to see, hoping to avoid involvement. The room, which had moments ago been filled with cheerful chatter, now carried a quiet undercurrent of tension. Every glance, every whisper, seemed to revolve around the boy and the man who mocked him. The contrast was stark, the opulence of wealth, the arrogance of privilege, and the fragile, quiet dignity of the boy, who seemed smaller in body but not in presence. The millionaire leaned closer, his face contorted with amusement, eyes glinting with cruel delight. "Doesn't he even know how to hold a fork?" he sneered. His laughter carried across the room like a whip, sharp and stinging. Some diners winced, turning their heads away. Others whispered to companions, muttering in disbelief. The boy's silence was almost unbearable, yet he did not flinch. Every fiber of his being was concentrated on enduring, on surviving the humiliation that the man was inflicting upon him in full view of the world. In that moment, something began to change inside the boy. The initial shock, the instinct to hide and shrink away, slowly transformed into something else. Beneath the fear, beneath the shame, there was a spark, quiet, small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A determination that he would not be broken by someone else's cruelty. The laughter that filled the restaurant, which should have diminished him, instead became fuel for an inner resolve that no one could see yet. The waitress shifted slightly, unconsciously moving closer, her eyes never leaving the boy. She saw the subtle signs, the way his back straightened imperceptibly, the way his fingers loosened their grip on the table. Something in him was awakening, a silent defiance that could not yet be named. She felt a flicker of hope and a pang of admiration at the same time. Here was a child, sitting alone in a room full of wealth and mockery, and yet he was not crumbling. Not yet. The millionaire, oblivious to this internal shift, continued his tirade, his voice rising, drawing the attention of every diner. Honestly, he's pathetic. Look at him. Can't even sit properly, can't even eat like a normal person. He laughed again, louder this time, slapping the table with one hand in exaggerated amusement. The boy's silence remained, a quiet wall that refused to be knocked down. Outside, the lights of the city glimmered through the restaurant windows, oblivious to the drama unfolding inside. The world carried on as it always did, unaware that in a small corner of this luxurious restaurant, a confrontation between arrogance and quiet strength was taking shape, a moment that would ripple far beyond this evening, and far beyond the boy's own expectations. By now, the tension in the air was palpable. Every eye that had glanced at the boy lingered, some in pity, some in curiosity, others in judgment. Yet in the middle of this storm of attention, the boy remained calm on the surface, though inside, his mind raced. Each mocking word, each cruel laugh, became a thread in a tapestry he was silently weaving, a tapestry of resilience, of strategy, and, most importantly, of an eventual reckoning. For the first time, he allowed himself a small thought, almost a whisper to his own heart, "They don't know who I really am." And in that thought, the first seeds of what was to come began to grow. The boy's gaze remained lowered at first, scanning the spotless tablecloth as if it could provide some kind of shelter from the ridicule surrounding him. His fingers drummed lightly against the edge of the table, a rhythm almost imperceptible, like a silent heartbeat of defiance. Each tap seemed to carry a tiny piece of the strength that had begun to awaken within him. Around him, the restaurant continued its bustling life, glasses clinking, forks scraping plates, the occasional soft laughter of oblivious diners, yet none of that noise could touch the bubble of tension forming at his corner of the room. The millionaire, unaware of the silent storm growing in the boy's chest, continued his cruel performance. He leaned back slightly, his laughter echoing again. "Come on, boy. You must have some talent, right? Surely, you can at least eat properly." His tone was mocking, a mixture of amusement and superiority, and he waved one hand theatrically, drawing the attention of nearby tables. A few diners looked up briefly, only to return to their meals, hesitant to confront someone so powerful and visibly wealthy. The waitress, a young woman with shoulder-length brown hair and a concerned expression, couldn't help but glance nervously between the two. She had seen arrogance before, but this was something different, something sharp, cutting through the normal flow of the evening. She felt a tug at her heart, a mixture of empathy for the boy and anger at the man who thought his wealth gave him the right to humiliate another human being. She gripped her order pad tightly, her knuckles whitening, unsure whether she should intervene or stay silent. Meanwhile, the boy drew in a slow, steady breath. Inhaling deeply, he allowed his body to relax slightly, his shoulders straightening imperceptibly. Though outwardly he appeared small, vulnerable, and unsure, the mind inside was alert, calculating, observing. Every gesture, every movement of the millionaire, was stored carefully, like data in a well-organized file. The boy understood something that the man would never expect. Strength was not measured in wealth, loudness, or outward power, but in the quiet persistence of one's mind and spirit. "Do you even understand what you're doing?" The boy thought silently, but he did not speak. His silence, intentional and calculated, began to shift the atmosphere. The sharpness of the millionaire's laughter no longer dominated the room. Instead, it collided with a new energy, something unspoken but undeniable. The boy's calm in the face of mockery created a tension, a kind of invisible challenge that demanded attention without a single word being uttered. The millionaire leaned closer again, as if proximity would force a response. "Well, aren't you going to say something? Show me you're worth my attention." His voice was louder now, commanding, as if volume alone could elicit respect. He smirked, certain that the boy would cower, that the humiliation would be complete. But the boy remained still, allowing the man's arrogance to fill the space with his own overconfidence. He noticed the subtle reactions of those around them, a mother whispering to her child, a couple exchanging uneasy glances, a man in a suit frowning but saying nothing. Their discomfort reflected the growing imbalance of the situation. The millionaire assumed power, but true power was quietly asserting itself elsewhere. The boy's mind raced. He had always known that people underestimated him. It had happened at school, at family gatherings, even in places where he had once tried to belong. But he had learned, over time, that mockery and dismissal could be transformed into a kind of leverage. The man mocking him had no idea that beneath the boy's modest exterior lay intelligence, strategy, and determination far beyond his own. The waitress moved slightly closer, keeping her hands clasped in front of her. She wanted to say something, perhaps to protect him, but even she sensed that this was not a battle of words, but a confrontation of wills. And in her heart, she began to hope that the boy would find a way to assert himself, to transform this public humiliation into something powerful, something unforgettable. As the millionaire continued to sneer, the boy's inner confidence solidified. He imagined a quiet wave of justice, one that did not rely on anger or retaliation, but on the patience and insight he had cultivated over years of being underestimated. Every sarcastic comment, every mocking laugh, was noted and stored mentally. This was not a moment to respond immediately. This was a moment to prepare, to observe, to plan the eventual shift of power that would come silently but inevitably. He allowed a faint smile to touch his lips, subtle enough that only the most observant could notice. It was not a smile of amusement, nor of defeat, but of quiet understanding, that the world outside, no matter how loud or cruel, could not diminish what was inside him. And in that tiny, imperceptible gesture, the first seeds of reversal were planted. The millionaire, still basking in his perceived dominance, did not notice. He continued his performance of superiority, oblivious to the slow but unstoppable tide that was beginning to rise in the boy. In that moment, the restaurant was no longer just a room of diners and meals. It had become the stage for something far larger than anyone could yet comprehend, the beginning of a lesson in humility, patience, and the unexpected power of quiet resilience. Outside, city lights reflected off the restaurant windows, casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the tension inside. The boy remained seated, still, silent, but inside, a storm of potential energy churned. Every laugh directed at him, every dismissive glance, only fueled the determination growing quietly, invisibly, in the small but resolute frame of a boy who had learned that true power often lay hidden until the moment was right. And as the millionaire laughed one final time in that part of the room, completely unaware, the boy whispered silently to himself, almost like a promise, "You don't know who I really am." Not yet. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath, caught between the ordinary hum of dining and the tension that radiated from the boy's corner. The millionaire, still laughing, leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of red wine as if his wealth could shield him from any discomfort or consequence. He did not yet sense the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the quiet storm that had begun within the boy. Around them, diners whispered softly among themselves. Some exchanged furtive glances, recognizing the cruelty of the millionaire's behavior, yet hesitant to intervene. Wealth, after all, commanded a strange kind of respect, or at least fear, in a place like this. No one wanted to risk angering a man who could pay for the restaurant's entire weekly revenue in a single evening. And yet, something about the boy's stillness unsettled them, a silent challenge that hinted at consequences far beyond their understanding. The boy rested his hands on the tablecloth, letting his fingers lightly trace the embroidered patterns. He seemed calm on the surface, but inside, a torrent of thought surged. He analyzed the man across from him, his posture, the arrogance in his gestures, the way his laugh filled the room like a weapon. Every detail was stored in his mind, catalogued for later. Years of being underestimated had trained him to notice the smallest clues, to see patterns that others missed. And now, he would use that knowledge to turn the tables, silently, methodically, and without haste. The waitress watched with a mix of concern and admiration. She had always believed in the power of kindness and courage, yet even she was startled by the boy's quiet composure. She thought she saw something in his eyes, a spark that no amount of ridicule could extinguish. It was the kind of confidence that could not be taught or bought, a deep, unshakable self-awareness that commanded respect without uttering a single word. The millionaire, oblivious to the growing tension, raised his voice once again. "Look at him. He doesn't even know how to sit properly. I've seen pets behave better than this." He laughed again, loudly, slapping the table with exaggerated emphasis. Some diners flinched, a few discreetly shook their heads, wishing they could make him stop. But the boy said nothing. Instead, he allowed a subtle, almost imperceptible smile to form at the corner of his lips. It was not a smile of pleasure, nor of anger, but of quiet certainty, a recognition that the moment was shifting, that power was not always where it seemed to reside. Inside him, the gears were turning, calculating every possible outcome, every reaction. He knew that confrontation was not always loud. Sometimes, it was a patient, invisible force that grew until it could not be ignored. The millionaire, noticing the faint expression on the boy's face, leaned forward, squinting. "What's that? Are you laughing at me? You think you can laugh back? Say something, boy. Or are you too weak to even speak?" His arrogance filled the space, bold and brash, but it no longer had the effect he intended. Instead of breaking the boy, it only reinforced his resolve. Around the table, the air seemed to thicken. Waiters moved silently past, careful not to interfere, while other diners felt an unspoken tension pressing against them. Even the clinking of silverware seemed muted, as though the room itself recognized that something extraordinary was unfolding. The millionaire, for all his wealth and influence, could not yet comprehend the quiet power building in front of him. The boy's mind drifted to the countless times he had been underestimated. In school, peers dismissed his intelligence. In public, strangers ignored or mocked him. Even family members occasionally assumed he could not succeed. Each incident had been a lesson, each insult a hidden teacher, showing him that patience and observation often mattered more than brute strength or loud words. And now, in the heart of this luxurious restaurant, he was ready to apply those lessons. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his head, letting his gaze meet the millionaire's. It was a steady, calm look, free of fear or shame. His eyes held intelligence and resolve, a silent promise that the man's laughter would not go unanswered, not in the way he expected. The millionaire blinked, slightly unsettled. He had assumed total dominance, yet in that single gaze, he felt an unfamiliar chill, as though he had glimpsed a storm he could not control. The waitress, noticing the exchange, felt her own pulse quicken. She could sense the boy's strength radiating outward, invisible but undeniable. Her heart lifted with hope and admiration. Perhaps this was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment where courage and patience would triumph over arrogance. She took a small, steadying breath, silently rooting for the boy she barely knew, yet already respected. For the first time, the millionaire faltered. The confidence that had dominated the room began to crack, imperceptibly at first, like a thin ice sheet over deep water. He coughed awkwardly, forcing a laugh, but it lacked the conviction of his earlier mockery. Something about the boy, about the calm defiance in his posture, made him uneasy. He could not yet name it, but instinctively, he sensed that the power dynamic was shifting. The boy's lips parted slightly, though no sound came out. He did not need to speak yet. Silence was his ally. Every mocking word the millionaire had spoken ricocheted back as a quiet fuel, strengthening him, sharpening his awareness. He knew that soon, very soon, the moment would come when patience, observation, and inner strength would speak louder than arrogance ever could. And outside, the city lights continued to glow through the restaurant windows, indifferent to the quiet drama inside. But inside that small, crowded space, a lesson was already taking shape, a lesson in humility, respect, and the unexpected power of a silent, determined heart. The boy sat quietly, feeling the weight of every gaze upon him. Each patron in the restaurant seemed to hold their breath, whether consciously or not, as though the tension radiating from his small corner had spread invisibly to the rest of the room. Even the clatter of dishes and the soft background music seemed to fade beneath the intensity of what was happening. For the first time that evening, the billionaire across from him noticed a subtle shift, a quiet but undeniable change in the air. The millionaire's laughter had lost some of its edge. He cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "Well, aren't you going to say something? Make yourself interesting, at least." His eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of unease betraying him. He had always relied on wealth and dominance to command attention, but here, in the face of a boy who refused to react, those tools felt strangely ineffective. The boy remained silent. He did not need to answer yet. He let the man's arrogance continue to echo through the room, letting it fill the space while he observed. Every subtle gesture, every slight shift in the millionaire's posture, every flicker of doubt, was stored in his mind. Years of being underestimated had trained him to notice these things, tiny cracks in confidence that others overlooked. And now, he had all the time he needed to study them, to prepare for the moment when silence would become a weapon far sharper than any words. The waitress approached cautiously, her tray trembling slightly as she brought a glass of water to the boy. Her eyes lingered on him, full of empathy and concern. She sensed something extraordinary about him, though she could not yet name it. The boy's stillness radiated strength, a quiet force that seemed to demand respect even in the midst of mockery. She placed the glass in front of him gently and stepped back, giving him space, knowing that this moment belonged entirely to him. The millionaire, meanwhile, leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine in his glass and trying to maintain his composure. "You must be joking," he said under his breath, though his tone lacked conviction. "A child, sitting there silently, thinking he can challenge me?" He laughed, but it was forced, strained, and hollow. Something about the boy's quiet defiance unnerved him more than any verbal confrontation ever could. Around the room, diners whispered softly, exchanging glances. The audacity of the scene, a wealthy man publicly mocking a boy who refused to respond, created an unusual tension. Some looked away, uncomfortable with the social power dynamics at play. Others leaned in slightly, curious, sensing that this encounter might lead to something unexpected, something beyond their understanding. The boy's mind raced silently, cataloging everything. He recalled every time he had been mocked, dismissed, or ignored. Each insult had been a lesson in disguise, teaching him patience, observation, and the subtle art of turning disadvantage into advantage. The man across from him was strong in the ways most people understood: wealth, confidence, social influence, but weak in ways that mattered most: humility, foresight, and understanding of true strength. Slowly, the boy shifted slightly in his chair, just enough to draw the millionaire's eyes back to him. His movements were deliberate, calm, and purposeful. He did not smile. He did not speak. Yet the millionaire sensed something, an invisible challenge, a quiet force that demanded recognition. His confident posture faltered slightly, the first crack in the armor of arrogance he had carried so proudly. The waitress watched, holding her breath. She saw the subtle changes, the way the boy's eyes glimmered with quiet determination. Something was happening, something that she could feel but could not yet define. And as she glanced at the other diners, she realized that the energy of the room was shifting. The silence was no longer empty. It carried a weight that even the millionaire could not ignore. The boy's thoughts remained focused. He did not need to shout or cry out. He only needed to wait, to observe, to let the arrogance of the man across from him build against him like a wave about to break. Patience was his ally, and silence his weapon. Every mocking laugh the millionaire offered only reinforced the strategy forming in the boy's mind. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity to those watching, the boy's eyes met the millionaire's fully. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a quiet, unyielding confidence. The room seemed to pause, the moment stretching out in an almost tangible way. The billionaire blinked, uneasy. He had always commanded control, always dictated the flow of attention, but here he felt something unfamiliar, a loss of dominance, subtle yet undeniable, to a boy who refused to fight in the ways he expected. In that instant, the boy whispered softly to himself, unheard by anyone else, "They think I am powerless. They do not know what I carry inside." The air in the restaurant was thick with anticipation. Every eye subtly shifted toward the boy, sensing the impending transformation of the dynamic. And though no one could yet see the full picture, the first threads of the reversal were quietly weaving themselves in place. The arrogance of wealth was meeting the quiet resilience of intelligence, patience, and inner strength, and the outcome would be more dramatic than anyone in the room could imagine. The boy's eyes, dark and steady, scanned the room again, though he saw everything through the lens of observation rather than fear. Each diner, each whisper, each subtle movement of a hand or glance carried meaning. The millionaire, still smirking and swirling his wine, remained unaware of the careful calculations unfolding in the boy's mind. He assumed dominance, but he was missing the invisible currents beneath the surface, currents that the boy had been learning to read since the day he realized the world underestimated him. The waiter paused near their table, noticing the tension in the air. He adjusted his posture, clearing his throat quietly, trying to avoid drawing attention. The room seemed to slow around the boy, as though the chaotic hum of the restaurant had muted to a soft, almost imperceptible buzz. Everything was background noise to the boy's focused mind. Every mocking laugh, every exaggerated gesture from the millionaire was a piece of data, a thread in the intricate tapestry of his strategy. For years, the boy had observed people like this, those who relied on wealth, power and outward confidence to dominate others. He had learned that true strength was invisible to the naked eye, residing in patience, understanding, and mental agility. The man across from him was loud and commanding, but his arrogance made him predictable. The boy had been waiting for this exact type of encounter, even if he had not known when it would arrive. And now, here it was, unfolding perfectly. The millionaire leaned forward suddenly, pointing a finger at the boy. "I don't understand you. Aren't you going to say something? Defend yourself." His laugh rang out again, forced and shrill, as though he were trying to cover the uneasy feeling growing inside him. But the boy remained silent. Each second of silence was a statement in itself, a challenge, an unspoken warning that things were not as simple as they appeared. The waitress shifted closer, her hands folded neatly, her heart pounding. She could sense the boy's inner strength radiating outward, subtle but undeniable. There was something about his calmness, his quiet defiance, that drew respect even from strangers in the room. She realized that this was a moment that transcended ordinary interactions. This was a display of raw intelligence and patience confronting arrogance head-on, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The boy finally placed his hands flat on the table, fingers spreading slowly as though to mark his presence. He did not speak, but the action alone seemed to draw the attention of the millionaire in a way that made him uneasy. The boy's posture was straight, composed, almost regal in its quiet dignity. Every observer in the restaurant felt it, a subtle shift in power, a signal that the game had changed, though they could not yet understand how or why. He remembered every time he had been underestimated, classmates dismissing him, adults assuming he was incapable, strangers laughing at his perceived weakness. Each insult had been a lesson, teaching him the value of observation, patience, and strategic thinking. And now, all that training would serve him. The millionaire, confident and arrogant, had no idea that the boy's silence was not submission, it was preparation. The billionaire's smirk faltered slightly. He leaned back in his chair, trying to regain composure, but the faintest shadow of doubt crossed his face. He had laughed at the boy, mocked him openly, and yet there was something intangible about the boy's calm gaze, something that unsettled him. He could not name it, could not grasp it, but instinctively he knew that the balance had shifted. The boy let his eyes flicker around the room, noting the reactions of others. Some diners were whispering, exchanging glances of curiosity or disbelief. Others simply watched silently, sensing the gravity of the moment. The waitress, still close by, realized that the boy's silence was commanding attention in a way that words never could. Patience, she thought, is more powerful than arrogance. Then, slowly, deliberately, the boy lifted one hand from the table and rested it lightly on the edge of his wheelchair. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, yet it carried a weight that the millionaire could feel but not understand. The man leaned forward, squinting, trying to decipher the meaning behind it. The boy's lips remained closed, his expression calm, confident, and unyielding. In that moment, a thought whispered through his mind, "They have no idea who I really am." And with that thought, the first real ripple of change began to spread through the room. The silence, once oppressive, now felt charged, electric, as though the air itself recognized the impending shift. The boy's quiet resilience was about to confront arrogance head-on, and the outcome would be nothing short of remarkable. The millionaire cleared his throat, attempting another forced laugh. "Well, are you going to do something, or are you just going to sit there?" His voice was slightly strained now. The boy's calm demeanor, his unbroken focus, was unnerving him in ways he had never expected. The arrogance that had carried him through countless rooms, meetings, and social gatherings was beginning to falter against the boy's quiet certainty. Every second that passed felt longer, more intense. The boy's patience was a weapon, his silence a strategy. And the room, whether the diners realized it or not, was witnessing a quiet confrontation between two very different kinds of strength. One loud, visible, and reliant on wealth, the other subtle, invisible, and rooted in intellect, strategy, and an unshakable sense of self. Outside, the city lights shimmered through the restaurant windows, indifferent to the drama inside. But within that small space, a lesson was unfolding, a lesson in humility, perception, and the power of calm determination. The boy remained seated, silent, and resolute, knowing that the moment of revelation would come soon. The boy remained seated, his posture calm, his hands resting lightly on the edges of the wheelchair. He did not speak. He did not flinch. Every mocking glance from the millionaire, every loud laugh, only seemed to sharpen his focus. He had learned long ago that the loudest voices rarely carried the truth, and the quietest actions often revealed the greatest power. Tonight, he intended to prove exactly that. The millionaire leaned back, swirling his glass of wine with an exaggerated flick of the wrist, as if flaunting the wealth and privilege that he believed made him untouchable. "Are you going to sit there all night, boy? Or do you have something to say?" His words were sharp, meant to provoke, to draw out weakness, but they found nothing. The boy's silence was not empty, it was deliberate, strategic, unyielding. The waitress moved subtly closer, careful not to interfere but unwilling to ignore the scene. She watched the boy, her heart pounding. There was something in his eyes now, a spark she had not seen before. It was no longer just calmness. It was understanding, awareness, a quiet intelligence that seemed far beyond his years. She felt a mixture of awe and hope, sensing that something extraordinary was about to unfold. The boy's gaze drifted briefly to the table, where a small tablet rested beside his plate. He touched it lightly with one finger, an almost imperceptible movement, but enough to catch the attention of the millionaire. The man's eyebrows shot up, a flicker of curiosity breaking through his arrogance. For the first time, he noticed that the boy might not be as powerless as he had assumed. "Wait a minute," the millionaire muttered under his breath, leaning closer, squinting. "What's that you're doing?" He could not yet see the full picture, but a seed of doubt had been planted. The arrogance that had fueled his mockery began to waver, replaced by unease. He had never encountered anyone like this, a boy who seemed small, vulnerable, even fragile, and yet radiated a quiet command that unsettled him deeply. The boy allowed himself a faint, controlled smile, subtle but deliberate. It was a smile that did not express amusement or anger but understanding, and it hinted at the storm that was quietly brewing beneath the surface. The room seemed to lean in, the whispers of nearby diners fading as all eyes gravitated toward this small corner, sensing that something significant was about to occur. The millionaire, attempting to regain his dominance, leaned back again and laughed, though this laugh sounded forced, hollow. "You think a little gadget or tablet is going to impress anyone? You're still a child." His words carried the sharp edge of arrogance, but also a note of nervous curiosity. He could feel that the boy's silence was a challenge, a puzzle that demanded to be solved. Inside the boy's mind, calculations ran swiftly. Every gesture, every word, every reaction of the millionaire had been observed, analyzed, and stored. Years of being underestimated had trained him to see patterns, to predict outcomes, to turn disadvantage into strategy. He knew that tonight, patience would serve him far better than confrontation. His silence, coupled with subtle hints of his abilities, would be far more powerful than any immediate declaration. The waitress noticed the boy's subtle hand movement on the tablet and leaned forward slightly, intrigued. Though she could not see what he was doing, she sensed that it was significant. There was a quiet confidence in his actions, a precision that suggested intellect far beyond what anyone could imagine. She exchanged a glance with a nearby diner, both of them silently acknowledging that this was no ordinary child. The millionaire's eyes narrowed as he watched the tablet, uncertain now, sensing that the boy was not merely sitting in silence but orchestrating something beyond his comprehension. The faintest trace of doubt crossed his face. He had mocked this boy with absolute certainty, never expecting resistance, yet here it was, not open defiance, but quiet strength, invisible yet palpable. The boy's lips remained sealed. The tablet was a subtle signal, a whisper of what he was capable of. It was enough to unsettle the millionaire, enough to draw attention, enough to create tension that pulsed through the room. The boy's silence was no longer passive, it was active, strategic, a calm force that demanded recognition without speaking a single word. The room seemed to pause around them. Diners, waiters, even the background noise of the restaurant faded into insignificance. The quiet defiance of the boy filled the space, and for the first time, the millionaire felt the fragile edge of uncertainty creep into his arrogance. He had underestimated his opponent entirely, failing to see the strength that could not be measured by wealth, loudness, or bravado. And in that moment, the boy allowed himself a thought, almost a whisper to his own heart. Soon they will see. They will all see. And they will understand that I am not what they think I am. The tension was now electric. The millionaire, still confident but slightly unbalanced, leaned closer again, watching every subtle movement of the boy. The waitress held her breath, sensing the turning of the tide. And the boy, small and seemingly fragile, continued to sit in quiet command, preparing to reveal the truth that would change everything. The boy's fingers rested lightly on the edge of the tablet, tracing an invisible path along its sleek surface. He had been careful, measured, deliberate. Every motion, every glance, every tiny shift of his body had been calculated over the past few minutes, preparing for this very moment. He was no longer just a passive figure in the corner of the restaurant. He was a strategist, a quiet force gathering momentum under the radar of the unaware millionaire. The millionaire, meanwhile, leaned closer again, squinting at the faint glow of the tablet. He did not yet know what it contained, but instinctively he felt that it held something significant. The arrogance that had carried him through countless encounters began to waver. He had always relied on wealth and power to assert dominance, yet here, in this small corner of a crowded restaurant, that dominance was slipping, threatened by a boy whose silence spoke louder than any words. A faint flicker of a smile appeared at the corner of the boy's lips, subtle and controlled. It was not a smile of triumph, at least, not yet. It was a smile of understanding, a recognition of the imbalance he had quietly begun to create. He had turned the millionaire's arrogance into a tool, using it to heighten anticipation, to build suspense, to prepare the moment when the truth of his abilities would finally be revealed. The waitress, observing closely, noticed the change in the atmosphere. The boy's calm, deliberate actions had shifted the energy of the room. Diners who had initially avoided looking now found themselves unable to ignore him. There was something magnetic about his quiet confidence, something that drew attention without demanding it. She held her breath, realizing that the unfolding scene was no ordinary confrontation. It was the first act of a lesson in power, patience, and intelligence. The boy's hand moved slightly on the tablet, tapping a few keys with precision. Data, graphs, complex algorithms, all subtly displayed on the screen, hinted at a mind far beyond what anyone in the room could have imagined. Yet he revealed nothing explicitly. His power lay in suggestion, in the faint glimpse of capability that made the millionaire's smug certainty falter. The millionaire frowned. "What is that?" he demanded, his voice tight, betraying the first threads of unease. "What are you doing over there?" He leaned closer, trying to catch a glimpse of the screen, but the boy's positioning kept it almost entirely hidden. The man's mind raced, trying to assert control, but every attempt was met with a calm, unyielding presence that left him unsettled. The boy's eyes met the millionaire's, steady and unwavering. For the first time, the man realized that this was not a child who could be intimidated, humiliated, or mocked into submission. There was a depth of focus, a precision of thought, and a calm power that he could not calculate or control. The realization made him tense, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. His confidence had faltered, replaced by a creeping uncertainty. The waitress exhaled softly, a quiet acknowledgment of the shift. She could feel it in the air, the anticipation, the quiet tension, the unspoken knowledge that the boy was about to turn the situation on its head. She had been a witness to arrogance many times before, but she had never seen it confronted so completely by someone so young, so seemingly fragile, yet undeniably formidable. The boy tapped the tablet once more, revealing a small chart that glimmered faintly on the screen. The chart was sophisticated, a precise visualization of data and projections that hinted at intelligence far beyond his years. Though the diners could not see the details, the glow was enough to draw attention, enough to suggest that he held knowledge, insight, and skill that challenged assumptions. The millionaire's eyes narrowed, unease growing. He could feel the quiet power radiating from the boy, subtle yet undeniable. The arrogance that had seemed absolute moments ago was now being challenged in a way he could neither predict nor counter. He leaned back, suddenly aware that the situation had changed entirely. He had mocked this child, assumed superiority, and now he faced the first signs of being outmatched. The boy's lips curved slightly, a ghost of a smile, as he allowed the tablet to rest gently on the table. He did not need to speak yet. The suggestion of his abilities, the controlled reveal, was enough to shift the energy of the room. Silence, patience, and subtle intelligence had begun to dismantle the facade of power the millionaire had relied upon so confidently. The room seemed to hold its breath. Every diner, every waiter, every observer sensed that something extraordinary was unfolding. The quiet, meticulous patience of the boy was creating a suspense that no one could ignore. The millionaire, once the dominant presence, now found himself at the mercy of anticipation, his confidence eroding under the weight of unseen skill and intelligence. And in the boy's mind, a single thought resonated, quiet but powerful. Soon, they will see. Not my age, not my size, not my silence, but what I can do. And then everything will change. The boy's gaze remained steady, calm, and deliberate. He did not speak, but his fingers moved across the tablet with a quiet precision that drew the attention of anyone paying close attention. The faint glow of the screen reflected in his dark eyes, hinting at the depth of knowledge and skill contained within his small frame. Every tap, every swipe was calculated, each movement purposeful. He was no longer just a passive observer. He was quietly orchestrating the moment, preparing to unveil the first hints of his true capabilities. The millionaire leaned forward, his confidence beginning to crack under the weight of uncertainty. What are you doing?" he demanded, trying to mask the unease creeping into his voice. His sharp, mocking tone faltered slightly, betraying the first threads of fear. He had assumed dominance from the start, certain that this boy's silence was a sign of weakness. Now, however, something about the calm precision of the boy's actions unnerved him. The waitress, still nearby, felt her heart racing. She sensed the shift in energy, the subtle power that the boy wielded without a single word. She had seen arrogance falter before, but never like this. The boy's quiet confidence radiated, pulling the room into a tension that was impossible to ignore. Every diner, whether consciously or not, felt the subtle weight of the unfolding drama. The boy's fingers paused momentarily on the tablet, and he allowed the screen to reveal a glimpse of what he had been working on. It was a complex network of calculations and diagrams, data points meticulously organized and connected in a pattern that only someone with extraordinary intelligence could comprehend. The glow was enough for the millionaire to catch a hint of it, enough to make his confident smirk falter. How are you doing that?" the man whispered under his breath, leaning in closer, trying to understand. He could see fragments of information flashing on the screen, but he could not begin to grasp the precision and insight behind it. The boy's calm demeanor, the measured patience, and the subtle reveal of knowledge created a tension that made the millionaire suddenly aware of his own vulnerability. The diners, now fully engaged, watched with curiosity and apprehension. Whispers spread quietly across the room. Some glanced at the boy with admiration, some with disbelief. The waitress held her breath, sensing that the moment of revelation was drawing nearer. She had been a witness to arrogance and humiliation, but now she watched as patience, intelligence, and quiet strategy began to overturn the balance of power in real time. The boy's eyes flicked toward the millionaire again. For the first time, he allowed a hint of challenge to show in his expression. It was subtle, a flicker of confidence, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable to anyone who looked closely. The millionaire's smile, once loud and mocking, had disappeared. He leaned back slightly, uncertainty creeping into his posture. The boy's calm defiance had begun to erode the man's perceived dominance, replacing it with something unfamiliar, apprehension. The tablet glowed faintly in the boy's hands, revealing more patterns, more data points that hinted at skills far beyond his age. He had spent years mastering observation, logic, and calculation, and now he was beginning to apply these talents in a subtle display of power. The millionaire, for all his wealth and experience, could not process the implications quickly enough. His arrogance had blinded him to the reality of the boy's abilities. The boy allowed a quiet smile to curve his lips again, controlled and deliberate. It was not a smile of triumph, not yet. It was the calm of preparation, the quiet assurance that the first stage of revelation had begun. Every second of silence had built tension, every mocked glance had been stored as fuel for this precise moment. And now, the first pieces of his true skill were visible, enough to disturb the balance that had once seemed absolute. The waitress, noticing the change in the millionaire's demeanor, felt a rush of anticipation. The boy's quiet strength and intelligence were reshaping the scene, subtly but undeniably. She realized that what was unfolding was more than a confrontation. It was a lesson in patience, resilience, and the hidden power of someone underestimated. The millionaire leaned back, his posture rigid, eyes narrowing. He had expected submission, but instead he faced a quiet command he could not counter. The boy's calm presence, coupled with the subtle reveal of his extraordinary abilities, made him doubt his own assumptions. For the first time, the arrogance that had dominated the room felt fragile, threatened by something invisible yet undeniable. And in that precise moment, the boy whispered to himself, a faint thought carried only to his own heart, "Soon they will understand. Not just my mind, but everything I am capable of. And then, everything will change." The boy's fingers hovered over the tablet for a moment, poised like a conductor about to bring an orchestra to life. Every movement was deliberate, each tap and swipe measured to create maximum effect. The faint glow from the screen reflected in his eyes, highlighting an intensity that seemed impossible for someone his age. The millionaire, who had been laughing not long ago, now leaned forward, his confident smirk faltering as uncertainty crept in. "What are you doing?" the man asked again, this time with genuine unease. His voice no longer carried mockery, only curiosity tinged with the first flickers of fear. He could see pieces of the boy's work on the screen, complex patterns and sequences that hinted at extraordinary intelligence. But he could not decipher them quickly enough, and the longer he stared, the more unsettled he became. The boy allowed himself a slight, controlled smile. Not a triumphant smile, but a quiet signal that his plan was in motion. Years of being underestimated had trained him to strike not with force, but with subtlety and precision. Every second of ridicule, every dismissive glance, every sarcastic comment from the millionaire had been stored mentally, waiting for this moment. He tapped the tablet once more, and suddenly, numbers, codes, and projections rearranged themselves on the screen in a rapid, elegant sequence. The glow intensified, catching the attention of nearby diners. Even from across the room, they could see that something remarkable was unfolding. Whispers began to ripple through the restaurant, a mixture of curiosity, disbelief, and awe. The millionaire's eyes widened. What is that?" he muttered under his breath, leaning closer to the boy, trying to make sense of what he saw. His arrogance, once absolute, now trembled under the weight of something he could not control or predict. Every mocking gesture he had made, every laugh that had filled the room, now seemed trivial in comparison to the boy's quiet display of skill. The boy's gaze remained calm and steady, meeting the millionaire's eyes with unwavering confidence. There was no fear, no hesitation, only clarity. He had waited, observed, and prepared. Now, the first tangible proof of his abilities was visible. He did not need to shout, argue, or fight. The work on the tablet spoke for itself, a silent declaration that challenged assumptions and demanded recognition. The waitress watched, breathless. The subtle glow, the precise movements, the quiet confidence, it was extraordinary. She realized that what the boy was showing was far beyond ordinary skill. Even from her position, she could feel the tension in the room shift, the once dominant arrogance of the millionaire beginning to crumble under the weight of intelligence and preparation. The millionaire leaned back, his chair creaking under his shifting weight. He could feel a creeping unease, something intangible but undeniable. He had mocked this boy with absolute certainty, assuming superiority, yet here was proof that he had gravely underestimated him. The boy's abilities were no longer hypothetical, they were visible, undeniable, and unsettling. The boy allowed a faint exhale, controlled and deliberate. This was only the beginning. Every pattern, every sequence, every precise movement of the tablet was part of a carefully orchestrated reveal. He had not yet unveiled everything, not yet fully shown the depth of his talent, but the first glimpse was enough to make the millionaire pause, falter, and finally reconsider the assumptions that had guided his arrogance. Across the room, diners leaned forward, captivated. The glow of the tablet, the calm intensity of the boy, the faltering expression of the millionaire, it was a silent drama that spoke louder than words. The balance of power had shifted, subtle but unmistakable, and everyone in the room felt the weight of it. The boy's inner voice whispered once more, quiet but resolute, "Soon they will know. Not just what I can do, but who I am. And when they understand, nothing will ever be the same." The millionaire's gaze flicked nervously between the boy and the glowing screen. The arrogance that had once dominated the room was now fractured. He had laughed, mocked, and assumed control, but the boy had quietly dismantled every illusion of superiority. And in the calm, deliberate precision of a child, he realized, perhaps too late, that he was no longer in control. The boy's fingers hovered over the tablet for a moment, poised like a conductor about to bring an orchestra to life. Every movement was deliberate, each tap and swipe measured to create maximum effect. The faint glow from the screen reflected in his eyes, highlighting an intensity that seemed impossible for someone his age. The millionaire, who had been laughing not long ago, now leaned forward, his confident smirk faltering as uncertainty crept in. "What are you doing?" the man asked again, this time with genuine unease. His voice no longer carried mockery, only curiosity tinged with the first flickers of fear. He could see pieces of the boy's work on the screen, complex patterns and sequences that hinted at extraordinary intelligence. But he could not decipher them quickly enough, and the longer he stared, the more unsettled he became. The boy allowed himself a slight, controlled smile. Not a triumphant smile, but a quiet signal that his plan was in motion. Years of being underestimated had trained him to strike not with force, but with subtlety and precision. Every second of ridicule, every dismissive glance, every sarcastic comment from the millionaire had been stored mentally, waiting for this moment. He tapped the tablet once more, and suddenly, numbers, codes, and projections rearranged themselves on the screen in a rapid, elegant sequence. The glow intensified, catching the attention of nearby diners. Even from across the room, they could see that something remarkable was unfolding. Whispers began to ripple through the restaurant, a mixture of curiosity, disbelief, and awe. The millionaire's eyes widened. "How? What is that?" he muttered under his breath, leaning closer to the boy, trying to make sense of what he saw. His arrogance, once absolute, now trembled under the weight of something he could not control or predict. Every mocking gesture he had made, every laugh that had filled the room, now seemed trivial in comparison to the boy's quiet display of skill. The boy's gaze remained calm and steady, meeting the millionaire's eyes with unwavering confidence. There was no fear, no hesitation, only clarity. He had waited, observed, and prepared. Now, the first tangible proof of his abilities was visible. He did not need to shout, argue, or fight. The work on the tablet spoke for itself, a silent declaration that challenged assumptions and demanded recognition. The waitress watched, breathless. The subtle glow, the precise movements, the quiet confidence, it was extraordinary. She realized that what the boy was showing was far beyond ordinary skill. Even from her position, she could feel the tension in the room shift, the once dominant arrogance of the millionaire beginning to crumble under the weight of intelligence and preparation. The millionaire leaned back, his chair creaking under his shifting weight. He could feel a creeping unease, something intangible but undeniable. He had mocked this boy with absolute certainty, assuming superiority, yet here was proof that he had gravely underestimated him. The boy's abilities were no longer hypothetical. They were visible, undeniable, and unsettling. The boy allowed a faint exhale, controlled and deliberate. This was only the beginning. Every pattern, every sequence, every precise movement of the tablet was part of a carefully orchestrated reveal. He had not yet unveiled everything, not yet fully shown the depth of his talent, but the first glimpse was enough to make the millionaire pause, falter, and finally reconsider the assumptions that had guided his arrogance. Across the room, diners leaned forward, captivated. The glow of the tablet, the calm intensity of the boy, the faltering expression of the millionaire, it was a silent drama that spoke louder than words. The balance of power had shifted, subtle but unmistakable, and everyone in the room felt the weight of it. The boy's inner voice whispered once more, quiet but resolute, "Soon they will know. Not just what I can do, but who I am. And when they understand, nothing will ever be the same." The millionaire's gaze flicked nervously between the boy and the glowing screen. The arrogance that had once dominated the room was now fractured. He had laughed, mocked, and assumed control, but the boy had quietly dismantled every illusion of superiority. And in the calm, deliberate precision of a child, he realized, perhaps too late, that he was no longer in control. The boy's movements on the tablet became faster, yet remained deliberate, each tap and swipe precise, as if conducting an intricate symphony of logic and calculation. Patterns shifted and changed before the millionaire's eyes, graphs rearranging themselves into sequences that seemed almost impossible for someone his age. The glow from the screen now illuminated more than just the boy's face. It highlighted his calm mastery, a quiet brilliance that demanded recognition. The millionaire leaned forward, eyes wide and unblinking. What are you doing? This isn't possible." His voice trembled slightly, betraying the first real cracks in his confidence. He had mocked the boy from the moment he had sat down, assuming arrogance and wealth were enough to dominate any situation. Now, he realized he had been utterly wrong. The child before him was not just intelligent, he was extraordinary. The diners around the table were drawn in, leaning closer as if they could see the invisible threads connecting every calculation, every pattern, every subtle movement on the tablet. Whispers spread quietly but rapidly. Some were in awe, some in disbelief. Every eye in the room sensed the quiet shift. The boy was no longer just a passive figure. He was in control, commanding attention without raising his voice, without needing to confront anyone directly. The waitress, standing nearby, felt her pulse quicken. She could sense the energy in the room shifting, the quiet dominance radiating from the boy. Every mocking laugh the millionaire had offered earlier now seemed empty, meaningless in comparison to the calm, precise display of skill unfolding before her eyes. She realized that this was more than intelligence. It was strategy, patience, and quiet power combined into one unstoppable force. The boy paused for a moment, fingers hovering just above the tablet, then tapped a single key. Immediately, a complex projection appeared on the screen. Diagrams, equations, and codes all interconnected in a flawless, elegant sequence. The faint glow now seemed almost hypnotic, casting patterns across the table and reflecting in the eyes of the diners. It was no longer subtle, it was undeniable. The boy's abilities were real, tangible, and impossible to ignore. The millionaire's breath caught. How can a child do this?" he muttered under his breath. His voice, once full of mockery, now held fear. He leaned closer, trying to comprehend what he was seeing, but every glance only revealed more of the boy's skill, more proof that his assumptions had been catastrophically wrong. The boy's lips curved into a slight, controlled smile. Not yet a triumph, but a signal that the first stage of revelation was complete. The preparation, patience, and quiet observation that had guided him through every insult, every mocking gesture, were now culminating in something that could not be denied. He had built this moment carefully, silently, and now the world was beginning to notice. The diners, captivated, felt the shift in energy. The arrogance that had once dominated the room was being dismantled piece by piece. Every mocking word, every scoff, every laugh from the millionaire now seemed insignificant compared to the boy's quiet mastery. A lesson in patience and intelligence was unfolding before their eyes. The millionaire's hands trembled slightly as he leaned back, trying to maintain composure, but failing. This isn't just intelligence," he whispered, almost to himself. There's something more here. Something I can't even grasp." His arrogance had been shattered, replaced by disbelief and a growing sense of fear. The boy's inner voice remained calm, confident, and resolute. "Soon they will understand. Not just my mind, but everything I am capable of. And then everything will change. The laughter, the mockery, the disbelief, it will all be forgotten in the face of truth." The restaurant seemed to pause around them. Waiters froze mid-step, diners leaned forward in anticipation, and the millionaire sat rigid, caught in the quiet storm the boy had created. It was no longer a simple confrontation of wealth against youth. It was a demonstration of unseen power, patience, and brilliance. And the final revelation, the moment that would leave everyone, especially the millionaire, completely stunned, was now closer than ever. The boy's fingers moved with a fluid precision, each tap on the tablet producing results that seemed almost impossible. Equations and projections appeared and rearranged themselves, forming intricate patterns that spoke of intellect far beyond his years. The faint glow illuminated his face, calm and composed, a stark contrast to the tension radiating from the millionaire. Every action was intentional, every movement part of a carefully orchestrated plan. The millionaire leaned forward, squinting at the screen, his earlier arrogance replaced with shock. This can't be real," he muttered, disbelief lacing his voice. He had assumed dominance from the start, confident that mockery and wealth were enough to control the room. Now, the reality before him shattered every assumption. The boy was not only intelligent, he was extraordinary. "Look at this," the boy said softly, almost to himself, though his words carried a weight no one could ignore. With a precise gesture, he revealed a series of predictions and calculations that mapped patterns across the city. Traffic flows, business analytics, even subtle financial trends. The level of detail was staggering, each data point perfectly calculated and interlinked. The millionaire's eyes widened, his hands gripping the table. How do you know all this?" he demanded, his voice trembling. He leaned closer, trying desperately to comprehend what was happening, but every new projection only confirmed that the boy's abilities were far beyond normal comprehension. For the first time, he felt powerless, dwarfed by a child he had thought weak and defenseless. The diners gasped, whispers spreading like wildfire. The faint glow of the tablet drew every eye, the elegance and precision of the boy's work captivating everyone in the room. It was no longer subtle, this was proof of genius, a revelation that defied expectations and shattered assumptions. The arrogance and mockery that had once dominated the space now felt trivial, insignificant, powerless. The waitress, holding her breath, watched as the boy calmly demonstrated the depth of his intelligence. He had not spoken loudly, had not demanded attention, but the clarity and precision of his actions had captured the room completely. Every gesture, every calculation, every subtle display of skill was a testament to patience, preparation, and quiet mastery. The millionaire's hands shook slightly as he leaned back, trying to regain composure, but failing. You can't be real," he whispered, disbelief heavy in his tone. He had underestimated the boy completely, assuming that wealth and dominance would always command respect. Now, he faced undeniable proof that he had been wrong, and the realization left him reeling. The boy allowed a faint smile, controlled and deliberate, to touch his lips. It was a smile of calm triumph, not arrogance, a signal that the first stage of revelation had been achieved. The patience, observation, and quiet calculation that had guided him through every insult and mockery had brought him to this moment. The room recognized it, even if they could not yet understand it fully. With a final gesture, the boy executed a series of rapid calculations that displayed a predictive model, showing outcomes and solutions that even experts would struggle to comprehend. The glow of the tablet reflected off the walls, casting intricate shadows across the faces of the diners, illuminating astonishment, disbelief, and awe. The millionaire leaned back, pale and stunned, finally realizing the depth of what he had dismissed. Every insult he had thrown, every mocking glance, had been met with patience, intelligence, and careful preparation. And now, the results were undeniable. The boy was more than he seemed, and the power dynamic had shifted completely. The boy's inner voice whispered, steady and confident, "This is only the beginning. Soon, they will understand everything I am capable of. And when they do, nothing will ever be the same." The boy's hands moved with calm precision over the tablet, each gesture unlocking a cascade of calculations and visualizations. The glow of the screen now bathed the table in a soft, ethereal light, casting intricate shadows across the faces of the diners, highlighting expressions of astonishment and disbelief. Every tap, every swipe was deliberate, each action a quiet command, a demonstration of intelligence far beyond anyone's expectation. The millionaire leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. His confidence, which had carried him through countless rooms and meetings, was collapsing in real time. This isn't possible," he muttered, almost to himself, eyes wide and unblinking. The arrogance he had displayed earlier had been completely dismantled. The boy was not only capable, he was extraordinary. And the realization terrified him. The boy allowed a subtle, controlled smile to form on his lips. He did not speak loudly, he did not demand attention. His calm mastery drew it naturally. Years of being underestimated had trained him to wield patience, observation, and silent strategy as tools far more powerful than words or force. Now, those tools were dismantling every ounce of the millionaire's assumed superiority. A diagram appeared on the tablet, a projection of patterns that spanned beyond the restaurant. Economic trends, infrastructure logistics, even subtle social dynamics. The level of detail, the accuracy, and the elegance of the predictive models were staggering. The diners leaned in, whispers spreading like fire, as they struggled to comprehend the depth of what they were witnessing. The millionaire's hands trembled slightly. How do you even know this?" he demanded, his voice breaking with tension. The arrogance that had once dominated the room had vanished, replaced with something unfamiliar: fear. Every mockery, every laugh, every display of dominance he had relied upon now seemed trivial, powerless in the face of the boy's quiet brilliance. The waitress felt her breath catch. She could sense the shift in energy, the quiet dominance radiating from the boy. Every movement, every gesture, every calculation was a lesson in intelligence and preparation. The room itself seemed to pause, the air thick with anticipation and awe. The boy had turned what had begun as ridicule into a demonstration of absolute control. The boy tapped the tablet again, executing a series of predictive algorithms that highlighted solutions to problems the millionaire had not even considered. The complexity, the elegance, and the precision of the work left the man completely stunned. He leaned back, trying to regain composure, but it was useless. The boy had taken control of the room without a single raised voice. You're, the millionaire stammered, unable to finish his thought. The words he had expected to use to assert dominance now failed him. He had assumed superiority, but the child before him had already stripped it away. The power balance had shifted irrevocably. The boy's inner voice whispered, steady and calm, "They see only what I allow them to see. Soon, they will understand everything. And when they do, nothing will ever be the same." The diners, now completely captivated, watched in silence as the boy continued to manipulate the tablet. Each calculation, each visual, each subtle gesture reinforced the truth. He was not what anyone had assumed. The millionaire, once the loudest presence in the room, now sat pale, trembling, and powerless to interrupt the display. For the first time, the arrogance that had driven him now felt fragile, completely exposed. The boy's calm intelligence, patience, and quiet command had undone it, leaving the man at the mercy of a child he had thought incapable. And as the final projections cascaded across the tablet, it became undeniably clear. The boy was not just capable, he was unstoppable. The boy's fingers paused over the tablet for a moment, and the restaurant seemed to hold its breath. The soft glow of the screen illuminated his composed, determined expression. For the first time, he allowed a subtle shift in posture, a signal that the quiet display of intelligence was about to transform into revelation. The tension in the room became palpable. Every diner, every waiter, even the millionaire, sensed that something monumental was about to occur. The millionaire's confidence, which had already begun to crumble, now teetered on the edge of panic. He leaned forward, eyes wide, gripping the edge of the table as if the physical support could anchor his unraveling composure. What are you planning?" he asked, his voice a mixture of disbelief and fear. Mockery had vanished. The room had become a stage for the boy's undeniable power. The boy smiled faintly, controlled and deliberate, his calmness radiating authority. He did not speak loudly, for words were unnecessary. Every movement of his hands, every subtle gesture, every pattern cascading across the tablet told a story louder than any voice could. The truth he had hidden so carefully, his brilliance, his insight, his extraordinary talent, was about to be revealed. A series of rapid taps on the tablet caused projections to spring to life in the air above it. Holographic charts, data streams, and predictive models hovered, glowing faintly, visible to everyone in the restaurant. They mapped complex systems, economies, scientific patterns, even human behavioral predictions, with an accuracy that stunned every observer. Diners gasped, whispering in disbelief. The waitress's hand flew to her mouth. She could barely comprehend what she was seeing. The millionaire froze, pale and trembling. "Impossible! This can't be!" he muttered, his voice cracking. Every ounce of arrogance, every assumption he had held, collapsed under the weight of reality. The boy, whom he had dismissed, mocked, and humiliated in his mind, now revealed himself as a force beyond comprehension. Every calculation, every projection, every subtle demonstration of skill was undeniable proof. He was not merely capable, he was extraordinary. The boy's inner voice echoed in his mind, calm and resolute. "Now they will see. Now they will understand everything I am. And when they do, nothing will ever be the same." He looked directly at the millionaire, eyes steady, unyielding. In that gaze was a challenge, a lesson, and an unspoken declaration of superiority. The man could not look away, could not dismiss the undeniable display of intelligence before him. The holographic projections danced, connected, and illuminated patterns no ordinary mind could perceive. "Why you?" the millionaire stammered, words failing him. He had mocked this child without thought, assuming power lay solely in wealth, confidence, and dominance. Now, he realized he had been blind, foolish, and completely unprepared. The boy's calm mastery, patience, and intelligence had turned the tables entirely. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the holographic projections. Diners watched in awe, the waitress could barely breathe, and the millionaire sat frozen, unable to interrupt the display. The boy's secret was now fully visible. His extraordinary intelligence, his ability to analyze, predict, and control complex systems, had finally been revealed in a manner that no one could ignore or dismiss. The boy allowed a faint, triumphant smile. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but the weight of it was undeniable. The millionaire's arrogance had been shattered, his mockery turned into silent acknowledgment of defeat. The balance of power, once assumed to be absolute, now belonged entirely to the boy. And as the projections continued to illuminate the room, the final truth became unavoidable. The boy, the one they had all underestimated, had completely transformed the narrative. Silence, patience, and unparalleled skill had prevailed over wealth, arrogance, and mockery. The millionaire, finally realizing the full magnitude of the boy's abilities, could do nothing but sit in stunned disbelief. The boy's fingers danced across the tablet with absolute mastery, each movement precise, deliberate, and commanding. The projections above the table now formed a complete, interconnected network of data, economic models, logistical patterns, and predictive algorithms that seemed to map the world itself. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the holographic display, reflecting the astonishment on every face. Every diner leaned forward, captivated, sensing that they were witnessing something far beyond ordinary comprehension. The millionaire's hands shook as he clutched the edge of the table. His earlier arrogance had vanished entirely. The mockery, the laughter, the smug confidence, all of it had been dismantled, piece by piece, by the quiet brilliance of a boy he had thought powerless. This can't be," he whispered, voice cracking. He leaned closer, desperate to understand, but the boy's display only grew more complex, more precise, more undeniable. The boy allowed himself a faint, controlled smile, one that carried quiet triumph without arrogance. Every insult, every scornful look, every mocking word that had been directed at him now fueled the revelation of his abilities. He had been underestimated at every turn, but the time for subtlety was ending. Now, the world would see him as he truly was. With a final, fluid motion, the boy executed a sequence on the tablet that caused the holographic projections to shift, align, and illuminate a single undeniable truth, a complete, flawless solution to a complex problem that the millionaire had been struggling to comprehend even in abstract terms. Every calculation, prediction, and outcome converged into a masterful demonstration of intellect. The diners gasped audibly. The waitress stumbled back slightly, unable to believe the brilliance unfolding before her eyes. Every projection, every glowing line, every precise connection screamed genius, precision, and control. The atmosphere in the restaurant was electric, charged with awe, disbelief, and a growing sense of respect for the small, composed figure dominating the room. The millionaire's face turned pale. "No, no way," he stammered, his voice barely audible. The confidence that had carried him through countless rooms, board meetings, and social gatherings had evaporated completely. He had mocked, ridiculed, and laughed at this boy without thought, and now he realized he had been utterly, catastrophically wrong. The power he had assumed was absolute was now nothing. The boy's gaze met the millionaire's, steady, unwavering, and unflinching. There was no malice, no arrogance, only quiet, undeniable mastery. He had been underestimated, but now the truth could not be denied. The display was complete, the revelation total, and the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. The projections shimmered, highlighting patterns, predictions, and solutions that no ordinary person could achieve. The millionaire slumped slightly in his chair, stunned, powerless, and humiliated in silence. Every mocking word he had uttered, every glance of superiority he had assumed, now felt absurd in light of the boy's brilliance. The diners erupted into whispered awe, some even standing to get a better look. The room was alive with energy, a mix of disbelief, amazement, and admiration. The boy had not needed to raise his voice, had not needed to shout or fight. His calm, deliberate, and precise actions had done all the work. He had taken control, revealed his genius, and humbled the man who had thought himself untouchable. The boy's inner voice echoed softly, "Now they know. Now they understand. And nothing will ever be the same." The millionaire's eyes darted around the room, finally meeting the boy's gaze fully. In that moment, he saw everything: intelligence, strategy, patience, and an unyielding calm that had completely dismantled his arrogance. For the first time in his life, he felt powerless. And the quiet, composed boy in front of him had won entirely, not with force, not with wealth, but with intelligence and mastery far beyond expectation. Silence fell over the restaurant, heavy and complete. The boy leaned back slightly, still composed, still in control. The glow of the projections reflected off his calm eyes, the room's energy shifting entirely in his favor. The lesson was clear: never underestimate someone based on appearances, assumptions, or mockery. And the millionaire, once loud and dominating, sat humiliated, utterly defeated, and in awe of the boy who had quietly claimed the room as his own. The restaurant remained silent, the only sound the soft hum of the holographic projections above the boy's tablet. The diners, wide-eyed and mesmerized, could hardly believe what they had witnessed. The air was thick with astonishment, disbelief, and a growing respect for the small figure who had completely overturned the power dynamic in the room. The boy had not raised his voice, had not shouted, had not demanded attention, and yet he now held it all. The millionaire sat frozen, his arrogance completely dismantled, his hands trembling slightly as he struggled to regain composure. He had assumed superiority, relied on wealth and presence to dominate every situation, and yet, in this single encounter, a child had humbled him utterly. Every mocking word, every dismissive glance, every laugh had been a mistake. And now, the consequences were undeniable. The waitress, standing close by, watched the millionaire's reaction with a mixture of relief and astonishment. Relief that the boy had been treated with respect, and astonishment at the brilliance he had displayed. She could feel the tension in the room begin to shift, as the diners, previously observers, now absorbed the weight of the revelation. This was more than a display of intelligence. It was a lesson in humility, patience, and the power of being underestimated. The boy leaned back slightly, his calm gaze sweeping the room. He had achieved what he set out to do. The arrogance of the millionaire had been replaced with a quiet, stunned respect. The balance of power had shifted completely, and there was no longer any question of who commanded the room. Every projection on the tablet, every sequence of calculations, every subtle display of skill had led to this moment. The millionaire's lips parted, and he finally found words, though they were weak, faltering, and powerless. I underestimated you," he admitted, barely above a whisper. It was not pride, not arrogance, not defiance. It was the honest, humbled acknowledgment of defeat. The boy's calm intelligence had achieved what no wealth or dominance ever could. It had forced recognition and respect through sheer ability. The diners watched the exchange with rapt attention, witnessing the rare transformation of someone who had once held absolute confidence now humbled before a child. Whispers of awe spread across the restaurant. Many realized that they had seen not only intelligence but courage, patience, and the quiet strength of someone who had endured mockery and ridicule for years and now turned it into triumph. The boy's inner voice remained calm and resolute. They understand now. The arrogance, the mockery, the assumptions, they are all gone. And the lesson is clear. Never underestimate what you cannot see, never dismiss the quiet, and never assume weakness where there is strength. The projections on the tablet began to fade gradually, their glow retreating as the boy set the device down. The room, previously bathed in the soft ethereal light, returned to normal. But the impact of what had occurred lingered, leaving everyone aware that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The millionaire sat frozen, pale, and humbled, finally understanding the depth of what he had dismissed. The waitress finally exhaled, her eyes still wide with amazement. She approached the boy cautiously, a smile of admiration spreading across her face. I don't know how you did that," she said softly. "But you're incredible." Her words carried genuine respect, acknowledging not just his intelligence but the courage and patience that had led him to this moment. The boy gave a slight nod, calm and unassuming. He did not need to boast, to speak loudly, or to demand recognition. His actions had spoken louder than any words could. The millionaire, the diners, and even the staff had witnessed the truth. He was not a child to be mocked, but a mind to be respected, a force of quiet power that could not be ignored. And as the room slowly returned to its usual rhythm, the lesson remained. Appearances deceive, arrogance blinds, and sometimes the quietest person in the room holds the greatest power. The restaurant had slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the air remained charged with the memory of what had just occurred. Diners whispered quietly among themselves, still glancing at the boy with awe and curiosity. The soft glow of the tablet may have dimmed, but the impact of his demonstration lingered in every mind present. The child who had once been underestimated had transformed the entire atmosphere with nothing more than calm precision and extraordinary intelligence. Even the millionaire, now slumped in his chair, could not stop glancing at the boy. Pride had been replaced by astonishment, and a quiet sense of fear that perhaps he had encountered someone far beyond his comprehension. Every mocking thought, every arrogant assumption, now felt trivial and foolish. And the realization that he had been publicly humiliated weighed heavily on him. Outside the restaurant, whispers had already begun to spread. The diners who had witnessed the event carried the story with them. Tales of a young boy who had confronted arrogance with intelligence, who had turned mockery into triumph. In a world dominated by wealth and influence, a single act of quiet brilliance was already gaining traction, and it was impossible for the story to remain contained. Back inside, the waitress moved closer to the boy, still amazed. "People outside, they'll talk about this," she said softly. "They'll say it's impossible, but I saw it. You're incredible." Her voice carried admiration and awe, reflecting what everyone in the room was beginning to understand. This was not luck, not coincidence, it was genius in motion. The boy smiled faintly, calm as ever. "Let them talk," he said softly, almost to himself. "Truth has a way of reaching the right people." His words carried a quiet confidence that went beyond mere intellect. They hinted at strategy, foresight, and understanding that every action has consequences far beyond the immediate moment. The millionaire, attempting to recover some semblance of composure, spoke again, though his voice lacked authority. You're extraordinary," he admitted reluctantly. "I never imagined." His words faltered, unable to capture the full weight of what he had witnessed. He had been unprepared, outmatched, and publicly humbled by someone he had assumed was powerless. Meanwhile, diners began to pull out phones, whispering and recording the aftermath. The story, the images, and the memory of the glowing projections began to spread, each retelling amplifying the boy's quiet triumph. By the time the evening ended, news of the extraordinary child who had humbled a millionaire in a restaurant had already begun to ripple through social media and word of mouth. The boy gathered his tablet, folding it with care. He remained composed, calm, and deliberate. The power of his intellect had been revealed, the arrogance of the millionaire humbled, and the attention of the world slowly beginning to turn toward him. This was only the beginning, the first ripple in a wave that would eventually grow impossible to ignore. The waitress watched, her eyes wide. "Do you know what you've done?" she asked, awe in her voice. "People will talk about this for years. You've changed something today." The boy's calm gaze met hers, acknowledging the truth without boastfulness. "I didn't do it for them," he said softly. "I did it because it had to be done." Outside the restaurant, night had fallen, but the story had already begun to spread like wildfire. From whispers to conversations to social media posts, the reputation of the boy who had confronted arrogance and revealed extraordinary skill was growing. The world, unknowingly, was about to meet someone they could not underestimate. And inside the restaurant, the millionaire remained pale, humbled, and silenced. The lesson had been delivered perfectly. Appearances deceive, arrogance blinds, and brilliance, when wielded with patience and precision, commands respect far beyond any wealth or influence. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Word of the boy's extraordinary intellect spread quickly, first through whispers in the neighborhood, then across social media, and finally reaching news outlets that couldn't ignore the story. The child who had quietly humbled a millionaire in a restaurant was no longer just a local curiosity. He was becoming a symbol of brilliance and quiet strength. The boy, however, remained composed. He did not seek attention, did not crave fame. His calm demeanor and deliberate actions continued to set him apart. While others focused on the spectacle, he focused on the consequences, on how he could use his intelligence to influence situations for the better, to anticipate outcomes, and to make decisions that had lasting impact. People began to approach him, some out of curiosity, others out of genuine admiration. The restaurant staff, the diners, and even local journalists wanted to understand how someone so young could perform feats so precise, so complex. The boy answered calmly, offering explanations that hinted at extraordinary talent, without ever appearing boastful. Every word was measured, every gesture deliberate. Meanwhile, the millionaire struggled to rebuild his image. In private and in public, he replayed the events over and over, unable to shake the memory of the child's calm mastery. Friends and colleagues, once awed by his wealth and confidence, now glanced at him with quiet skepticism. The boy had done more than demonstrate intelligence. He had disrupted an entire perception of power, showing that wealth alone was meaningless in the face of true capability. The boy began to use his skills to subtly influence those around him. Small interventions, precise calculations, and careful insights helped the restaurant staff optimize operations, increase efficiency, and even anticipate customer needs. His presence became a quiet catalyst for change, an unseen force that guided outcomes without overtly demanding attention. Even the diners who had witnessed the initial event began returning, drawn by curiosity and admiration. The boy's reputation had become magnetic, and his calm, deliberate approach inspired others to think, observe, and act with greater intelligence. The environment itself seemed to shift subtly, shaped by the quiet yet undeniable influence of someone who had mastered patience, observation, and foresight. The millionaire, increasingly aware of the boy's expanding influence, attempted to reassert control in subtle ways. He offered gifts, public recognition, and attempts at reconciliation, but the boy's actions were always measured. He neither sought vengeance nor flaunted superiority. He allowed outcomes to reflect reality naturally. Each interaction further highlighted the stark contrast between arrogance and quiet mastery. The waitress, who had witnessed the entire event from the beginning, often observed the boy in action. She realized that his true power lay not just in intelligence, but in the ability to transform situations subtly and effectively. Where others relied on force, volume, or dominance, he relied on understanding, insight, and precision. The impact was profound. Environments shifted, perceptions changed, and people began to reconsider what true influence meant. Even the millionaire could not ignore the truth. His attempts to reclaim authority were met with quiet resistance and undeniable results from the boy's interventions. Every effort he made to re-establish dominance highlighted his past arrogance and reinforced the lesson of humility. It was no longer a personal defeat, it had become a public one, and the consequences were irreversible. The boy's inner voice remained calm, resolute, and focused. Patience, observation, precision, these are the tools that change outcomes. Power lies not in wealth, influence, or volume, but in understanding and action. Let the world see what they will, and let them learn from what they witness. As the days passed, the boy's influence expanded beyond the restaurant. Small communities, local businesses, and curious individuals sought his insights. Each subtle intervention, each careful demonstration of skill, amplified his reputation while leaving those who underestimated him in awe. And the millionaire, once the loudest presence in the room, now lingered in the background, a humbled witness to the quiet power of brilliance. As the days turned into weeks, the boy's reputation continued to grow. The story of the restaurant incident had spread far and wide, attracting the attention of skeptics, journalists, and those who believed such brilliance could not exist in someone so young. They came with questions, challenges, and sometimes outright disbelief, eager to test the limits of what they assumed was a child's capacity. The boy welcomed them with calm composure. He did not seek to prove himself, but he did not shy away from scrutiny. Every demonstration of skill was precise and deliberate, revealing just enough to silence doubt while maintaining an air of quiet mystery. Those who came expecting arrogance or ego found instead a serene intelligence, a presence that commanded respect without demanding it. One afternoon, a group of local business owners arrived at the restaurant, curious about the boy who had transformed perceptions of skill and influence. They questioned his abilities, skeptical of the stories they had heard. The boy listened patiently, analyzing each concern with meticulous attention. Then, with subtle gestures, he guided them through solutions to problems they had been struggling with for years: logistical inefficiencies, customer retention challenges, and financial miscalculations. By the end of the demonstration, the business owners were silent, unable to deny the precision and depth of the boy's insights. Their skepticism had been replaced with astonishment and respect. Some even whispered to each other that they had never encountered anyone who could so calmly and completely address complex challenges, especially someone so young. The millionaire, now a frequent observer, watched from a distance. His attempts to assert influence had been repeatedly thwarted by the boy's calm mastery. Each public display, subtle intervention, and quiet solution further cemented the child's authority. The man's pride had been shattered, and though he attempted reconciliation or acknowledgement, it always fell short. The boy did not act out of revenge. He acted with foresight and understanding, letting results speak for themselves. Even skeptics who had arrived with doubts left the restaurant impressed, often returning to witness more. Word of the boy's abilities spread like wildfire, gaining the attention of influential individuals, local authorities, and educators who were eager to observe and learn. What had started as a simple confrontation in a restaurant had grown into a ripple of recognition, drawing attention from all directions. The waitress observed silently, marveling at the boy's patience. Unlike others who sought power or recognition, he moved through the world with quiet precision. Every interaction, every solution, every subtle influence was a lesson in patience, intelligence, and calculated action. She realized that he was not simply brilliant, he was transformative. His presence reshaped not only perceptions but also the outcomes of events around him. The boy's inner voice remained calm, almost imperceptible. Every challenge, every doubt, every skeptic is an opportunity. Watch, listen, and act with precision. Influence is not taken, it is earned through understanding, observation, and action. Let them test me. Let them doubt. The results will speak louder than words. Even the millionaire, sitting quietly, could not escape the lesson he had learned. His attempts to reclaim dominance had become futile. The boy's intelligence, strategy, and patience had established a new hierarchy, one that could not be challenged by wealth or arrogance. The child had become the quiet authority in a world that had previously valued confidence over substance. As the afternoon light faded, the restaurant hummed with activity, yet all eyes occasionally drifted to the boy. He had become more than a topic of conversation. He was a force, subtle yet undeniable, shaping the room and influencing outcomes without overt effort. And as the sun set outside, his quiet mastery continued to ripple outward, leaving a trail of awe, respect, and irreversible change in its wake. Weeks had passed since the restaurant incident, but the boy's influence was far from fading. The whispers that had begun as astonished murmurs had grown into full conversations across communities. People spoke of the child who could unravel problems others had struggled with for years, whose quiet intelligence reshaped outcomes without demanding attention. And the boy himself remained calm, deliberate, and focused, never seeking glory, only precision. It began with small interventions. Local businesses sought his insights to improve logistics, students requested guidance on complex subjects, and even community leaders discreetly asked for his advice on solving disputes or improving systems. Every time he engaged, he analyzed the situation thoroughly, calculated possible outcomes, and offered subtle yet transformative solutions. Those who observed him often felt as though they were witnessing magic, a clarity of thought that seemed impossible for someone his age. The millionaire, who once commanded attention through wealth and confidence, found himself repeatedly confronted with the boy's quiet mastery. Each time he attempted to assert influence or reclaim status, the child's precision and insight neutralized the effort. Publicly or privately, the lessons were the same. Arrogance and force could not overcome understanding and intelligence. The boy's reputation spread beyond the local area. Media outlets picked up the story, reporting on the child who had demonstrated extraordinary brilliance while remaining humble. Analysts, educators, and experts began examining his work, trying to understand how someone so young could produce results so precise and impactful. Each time, they found not only intelligence but strategy, foresight, and patience, qualities that turned simple skill into transformative power. Even as fame grew, the boy remained grounded. He did not flaunt his abilities, nor did he seek recognition. Each action was deliberate, carefully measured to achieve the intended effect. Where others relied on influence, volume, or intimidation, he relied on observation, understanding, and calculated intervention. His quiet authority began to extend into larger, more complex arenas: community planning, educational initiatives, and small-scale innovations that subtly improved systems and lives. The waitress, who had witnessed the original restaurant incident, marveled at the boy's growth. "It's incredible," she said softly to a colleague one afternoon. "He doesn't just solve problems. He changes the way people think, the way they act. And he does it without saying much at all." Her words captured the essence of his power. Influence derived not from ego or dominance, but from precise, impactful action. The millionaire, increasingly aware of the boy's expanding reach, felt a mixture of fear, awe, and reluctant respect. His previous arrogance had been shattered, replaced by the realization that he was no longer the dominant figure. The child had transformed every expectation, every assumption, and every interaction into a demonstration of control and mastery. Wealth and influence were meaningless in the face of such calculated intelligence. The boy's inner voice echoed, steady and confident, influence is not claimed. It is earned through understanding, precision, and foresight. Every problem solved, every subtle intervention, every calculated move strengthens the impact. Let them watch. Let them learn. The world is shaped not by noise, but by quiet mastery. As the sun set beyond the city skyline, the boy walked through streets now alive with whispers of admiration. Small businesses thrived with his guidance, students excelled under subtle mentorship, and community leaders began to rely on insights they could barely articulate. The child who had once been mocked and underestimated had become a catalyst for transformation, calm, deliberate, and unstoppable. And somewhere, watching from a distance, the millionaire could do nothing but reflect on his arrogance, humbled beyond measure, as the boy continued to expand his quiet dominion over a world that had once dismissed him. Word of the boy's brilliance had spread far beyond the restaurant, reaching influential circles, corporate offices, and even local authorities. One afternoon, a challenge arrived that was unlike anything he had faced before. A prominent business consortium, skeptical of the reports, presented him with a complex problem, a multi-layered logistical crisis threatening several industries at once. It was intricate, seemingly unsolvable, and designed to test every ounce of intelligence and foresight. The boy examined the documents calmly, his eyes scanning charts, patterns, and interconnections with quiet intensity. There was no panic, no hesitation, only deliberate observation and careful calculation. He measured each variable, anticipated potential consequences, and mapped out possibilities with precision. The consortium's representatives, confident in their skepticism, waited eagerly, expecting either failure or a simplistic solution. Hours passed. The boy worked silently, occasionally tapping a tablet, scribbling subtle notes, and observing patterns invisible to the untrained eye. His focus was absolute, his mind dissecting every layer of complexity. The room was silent except for the soft hum of devices and the quiet scratching of his pen. Every glance from the consortium members conveyed disbelief at the patience and depth of his process. Finally, the boy leaned back and presented his solution. What appeared on the screen was nothing short of genius. A fully integrated, precise plan that addressed every variable, prevented cascading failures, and optimized outcomes across all affected industries. His solution was elegant, efficient, and far beyond what anyone in the room had imagined possible. The consortium members were stunned. Whispers erupted as they reviewed the plan, unable to deny its brilliance. Every calculation, every predictive model, every contingency had been addressed flawlessly. The challenge, designed to expose flaws or inexperience, had instead showcased intelligence, strategy, and patience at a level that none could match. The millionaire, observing from a corner, felt a wave of awe and humiliation wash over him. He had mocked the boy once, assuming superiority based on wealth and presence, and now he watched as the child executed a plan that could influence entire industries with calm precision. Every arrogant assumption he had held was now invalidated. The boy's inner voice remained calm, resolute. Challenges are only tests of patience and understanding. Solve them deliberately, and results will speak louder than doubt, skepticism, or arrogance. One of the consortium leaders finally spoke, his voice trembling. I don't know how to describe this. We expected failure. What we've witnessed is, his words faltered, unable to fully capture the impact. The boy merely nodded, silent, allowing the results to speak for themselves. Outside the building, news of the solution began to spread. Word of the boy who had solved the unsolvable problem traveled quickly, adding another layer to his growing reputation. The story of his brilliance, patience, and strategy was now undeniable, reaching far beyond the local community. Inside, the millionaire sat quietly, humbled beyond measure. He realized that the boy's mastery was not just intelligence, it was strategy, foresight, and calm authority combined into one unstoppable force. No wealth, no arrogance, and no influence could challenge what the boy had achieved with quiet precision. And as the boy quietly left the room, leaving stunned adults in his wake, the lesson was clear. True power is not claimed through noise, mockery, or dominance. It is earned through patience, observation, intelligence, and the ability to act decisively when it matters most. The world was beginning to take notice, and the boy's quiet dominion was only expanding. News of the boy's solutions had spread far beyond his neighborhood. From local media to national coverage, everyone wanted to witness or understand the intelligence that had quietly humbled a millionaire and solved problems deemed impossible. Yet the boy remained calm, focused, and deliberate. Fame was not his goal. Impact was. His strategy was simple: act with precision, influence with insight, and let the results speak louder than any word. The challenges he faced now were larger and more complex. Regional authorities requested his guidance on urban planning to prevent future logistical crises. Educational institutions sought his advice to design programs for gifted students. Private corporations, skeptical but curious, tested him with datasets, simulations, and hypothetical scenarios meant to probe the limits of his understanding. He met each challenge with the same calm composure. Observation came first, studying the variables, analyzing interconnections, and anticipating the ripple effects of every potential choice. Calculation followed, precise, deliberate, thorough. And action was always measured, elegant, and transformative. No challenge was too big, no skepticism too loud to disrupt his focus. Even the millionaire, now frequently in the public eye as an observer of the boy's growing influence, could do nothing to regain authority. Attempts to intervene subtly or assert dominance were immediately neutralized by the child's insight. Every effort to overshadow him only highlighted the contrast between arrogance and quiet mastery. Wealth and presence were powerless against patience, intelligence, and strategy. The boy's reputation now inspired a new generation. Children, students, and adults alike looked to him as a model of intelligence, patience, and humility. Yet he never sought attention or accolades. His influence was a natural consequence of skill applied with precision. Every decision he made, every problem he solved, every subtle guidance he provided reinforced a quiet authority that no one could challenge. Skeptics, curious observers, and those who doubted him were drawn into witnessing his methods firsthand. And each time, the result was the same: astonishment, awe, and eventual acknowledgement of his extraordinary abilities. The boy had transformed doubt into respect, criticism into admiration, and mockery into silent acceptance of his mastery. The millionaire, sitting in his own office, watched the reports with a mix of disbelief and reluctant respect. His past arrogance had been shattered. He now understood the depth of what he had underestimated: the calm, relentless intelligence of a boy who could anticipate, calculate, and execute with precision beyond imagination. Every attempt at arrogance now highlighted his own inadequacy. The boy's inner voice remained calm and focused. Influence is quiet. Power is earned through insight, foresight, and patience. Let them test, let them doubt. Each challenge strengthens the impact, each skeptic confirms the result. The world will see, whether they are ready or not. By now, the boy's presence had expanded beyond individuals and local communities. Corporations adjusted operations based on his subtle guidance. Schools revised curricula inspired by his methods. Entire systems of problem-solving were quietly reshaped, all without a single boastful declaration. The world was beginning to recognize, however slowly, that true mastery required more than wealth, status, or loud assertions. It required intelligence applied with precision, patience, and insight. And as the sun set over the city, a quiet sense of inevitability settled. The boy's influence, growing steadily and invisibly, was transforming environments, reshaping perceptions, and leaving no doubt. He was no longer just a remarkable child. He was a force that could not be ignored, and the millionaire, once the loudest voice in the room, remained humbled, a witness to a quiet supremacy he could never reclaim. Months had passed since the restaurant incident, and the boy's reputation had reached a level few could ignore. The world, slowly awakening to his extraordinary abilities, began presenting him with challenges unlike any he had faced before. This time, it was not a single problem, a single corporation, or a localized crisis. It was a multi-layered global scenario, a test of intellect, foresight, and strategy designed to challenge the limits of even the most brilliant minds. Governments, international organizations, and private enterprises collaborated to present him with a series of interconnected problems. Economic fluctuations, environmental risks, and logistical crises spanning continents. The goal was not only to test his problem-solving skills, but also to understand the breadth of his foresight and his ability to anticipate cascading consequences. Skeptics hoped he would falter. Admirers knew he was capable of extraordinary precision. The boy approached the challenge as he always had, with calm observation. He studied the patterns, mapped interdependencies, and projected outcomes. Variables that would confuse even expert analysts were clear to him. His mind moved fluidly across systems, connecting dots, anticipating obstacles, and calculating contingencies with a patience and precision that seemed almost supernatural. As the consortium of experts watched, the boy executed a sequence of plans and projections that anticipated outcomes months in advance, factoring in human behavior, environmental variables, and economic trends simultaneously. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of devices and the occasional scribble of notes. Every move was deliberate, every calculation elegant and precise. Hours turned into days. The boy remained focused, calm, and unflinching. Skeptics tried to challenge assumptions, introduce unexpected variables, and push the boundaries of the problem. Each attempt was neutralized not with force or ego but with careful observation, calculated adjustments, and strategic foresight. Results unfolded perfectly, revealing the depth of his mastery and the flawlessness of his reasoning. The millionaire, observing remotely, felt a deep sense of awe mixed with lingering humiliation. He had once believed wealth, influence, and confidence were enough to command any room. Now he watched a child, calm, patient, and deliberate, outmaneuvering systems and people far more experienced than himself. Each success reinforced the lesson: true power comes from intelligence, foresight, and action, not status or arrogance. The boy's inner voice remained unwavering. Every challenge is a test of patience, observation, and strategy. Let them doubt, let them try. Every obstacle strengthens the outcome. The world will recognize mastery when it cannot be denied. By the end of the week, the boy's solutions had not only addressed the crises but optimized systems in ways no one had anticipated. Economic stability improved in affected regions, environmental risks were mitigated with precision, and logistics across industries were refined for maximum efficiency. Skeptics were silenced, experts were astounded, and admirers marveled at the calm authority with which he had handled the seemingly impossible. The world began to acknowledge him not merely as a child prodigy but as a quiet force of transformation. His influence was now global, his intellect undeniable, and his patience unmatched. The millionaire, once a symbol of arrogance and dominance, could do nothing but observe, humbled, awed, and forever changed by the child who had rewritten expectations through calm mastery and unwavering intelligence. And as the boy finally leaned back, allowing the room and the world to absorb the magnitude of his accomplishments, one truth remained undeniable: appearances deceive, arrogance blinds, and true mastery lies in patience, foresight, and action executed with precision. The boy had reached the culmination of his journey. Every small victory, every subtle intervention, and every carefully calculated action had led to this moment. The global challenge he had faced was solved, and the world watched in stunned silence. Experts, skeptics, and observers all knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, but none could yet grasp the full extent of the boy's brilliance. The millionaire, seated in his office far away, felt a wave of disbelief and humiliation wash over him. He had once laughed, mocked, and underestimated this child. Now, after weeks of observing the boy's influence expand beyond imagination, he realized he had been blind. Wealth, status, and arrogance were meaningless against true intelligence and strategy executed with calm precision. The boy stood quietly, his tablet in hand, the holographic projections casting soft light across his composed face. And then he revealed the final layer of his plan, the ultimate plot twist. Every solution he had implemented, every system he had optimized, every subtle intervention he had made, was interconnected in a way that none had anticipated. What had seemed like isolated acts of brilliance were, in truth, a coordinated demonstration of foresight and strategic mastery. The world saw patterns emerging from chaos. Economic trends aligned, environmental systems stabilized, and logistical networks optimized, all at once. The boy had not merely solved problems. He had rewritten outcomes on a scale that no one had imagined possible. Observers could see, for the first time, the elegance and precision of his overarching strategy. The millionaire's face turned pale. He leaned forward, unable to look away, his mind racing to comprehend what had unfolded. Every assumption he had held about power, influence, and intelligence was being dismantled before his eyes. The boy, whom he had once deemed weak and incapable, had proven himself not only brilliant but unstoppable in vision and execution. Whispers spread across the global audience. Analysts scrambled to understand the interconnected systems. Experts admitted, reluctantly and quietly, that they had underestimated him. And the boy remained calm, almost serene, letting the results speak louder than words ever could. The impact was total: awe, admiration, and humility in equal measure, directed at a child who had rewritten the rules of expectation. The waitress, watching the final demonstration from her local vantage, whispered to herself, tears in her eyes, "I knew. I always knew." She had witnessed the journey from ridicule to mastery, from underestimation to absolute authority. The boy's calm strength had changed everything, not with arrogance, but with intelligence, patience, and foresight. The boy's inner voice echoed softly, "Every insult, every doubt, every moment of underestimation was necessary. The lesson is complete. Never judge by appearances, never assume weakness, and never underestimate the quiet mind." The millionaire finally spoke, his voice trembling. You've done what no one thought possible. I underestimated you. His words faltered, unable to convey the depth of realization. Humility replaced arrogance entirely, leaving him stunned and forever changed. And in that silence, the world understood the ultimate truth. Power is not loud, wealth is not dominant, and influence is not claimed. It is earned through insight, precision, and unwavering mastery. The boy had achieved all of this quietly, deliberately, and flawlessly. The plot twist was complete. The world would remember this moment forever. A child had humbled a millionaire, transformed systems, and rewritten expectations, not through force or noise, but through calm brilliance that no one could ignore. And as the final projections faded, one thing was clear: the boy's quiet supremacy was absolute. The world was no longer the same. News of the boy's final demonstration, the intricate, interconnected solutions, the seamless coordination of global systems, and the quiet but absolute mastery of complex problems, spread across every corner of the globe. People whispered in awe, governments took notice, and corporations began consulting with him, eager to learn from the mind that had quietly reshaped expectations and outcomes. Despite the attention, the boy remained calm. Fame and recognition were not his goals. Transformation was. Every action, every decision, every subtle guidance was designed to create lasting impact. The restaurant incident, once a personal confrontation with arrogance and mockery, had become the catalyst for a ripple effect that would continue to shape systems, decisions, and perceptions for years to come. The millionaire, now a shadow of his former self, sat quietly in reflection. Every attempt to regain authority had been futile. He had underestimated the child, mocked him, and believed that wealth and status could override intelligence and patience. Now, he understood the depth of his mistake. Humility replaced arrogance, and a quiet admiration began to form, reluctant but genuine. The boy had done what no one else could. Communities, businesses, and even educational institutions began to restructure based on the boy's methods. Efficiency improved, conflicts were minimized, and opportunities that had once seemed impossible were now within reach. Leaders who had doubted him were forced to acknowledge his genius, and skeptics became believers, unable to deny the precision, foresight, and intelligence that guided every action he took. The waitress, still observing, felt a sense of pride and awe. She had witnessed the journey from ridicule to triumph, from mockery to global impact. "He didn't just prove them wrong," she whispered. "He changed the way they think, the way they act. And he did it all quietly." Her words reflected the truth of his mastery. Influence earned through insight, patience, and intelligence is far more powerful than any shout or boast. Even those who had never met him felt the effects of his guidance. Systems improved, solutions were implemented, and problems that once seemed insurmountable were solved with subtlety and brilliance. The boy's presence was felt everywhere, even in places he had never visited, because true influence spreads quietly, logically, and inevitably. The millionaire, now humbled and reflective, reached a simple understanding. Wealth and arrogance are temporary, but intelligence, patience, and strategic action endure. He had been defeated not by force, but by mastery, and the lesson would remain with him forever. The boy's inner voice echoed softly, calm and assured, "Every challenge, every doubt, every moment of underestimation has been part of the journey. Influence is earned, mastery is achieved, and the world recognizes what cannot be ignored. Let the world act, let them watch, results speak louder than words." By the end of the day, the boy's impact was undeniable. From a restaurant confrontation to global recognition, he had reshaped perceptions, influenced decisions, and humbled those who had assumed superiority. And though the world now knew of his brilliance, he remained composed, deliberate, and quietly in control, knowing that true mastery is not about recognition, but about the lasting effects of calculated, intelligent action. The world had witnessed the quiet supremacy of a child, and nothing would ever be the same. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the boy stood quietly at the edge of the city park, the soft glow of streetlights illuminating his calm face. The journey from the restaurant to this moment had been extraordinary. Mockery had been turned into triumph, arrogance into humility, doubt into respect. He had transformed not just individuals, but entire systems, communities, and perceptions. Yet, through it all, he had remained composed, deliberate, and quietly masterful. The millionaire, now a distant observer both humbled and reflective, had retreated into silence. He had watched as the boy solved problems, influenced decisions, and reshaped expectations with patience, intelligence, and foresight. Every attempt to assert dominance, every moment of arrogance, had been met with calm mastery. And though he had once laughed at the child, he now understood something he could never unlearn. True power lies in knowledge, strategy, and action, not in wealth or presence. The boy's reflection on his journey was quiet but profound. Every insult, every doubt, every mocking glance had served a purpose. They had fueled patience, sharpened insight, and revealed the depth of his strategic thinking. He understood now that influence was not given, it was earned. And mastery, true mastery, was not loud, it was deliberate, precise, and undeniable. Around him, the city buzzed with life, yet the effects of his work were visible everywhere. Communities operated more efficiently, businesses thrived on insights he had provided, and educational systems incorporated his methods to foster the growth of young minds. Quietly, without need for accolades, he had transformed the world around him. The waitress, who had followed his journey from the very beginning, watched him from a distance. Her eyes were filled with admiration and a quiet pride. "He's changed everything," she whispered softly. Not by shouting, not by showing off, but by being brilliant, patient, and unshakable. Her words captured the essence of the boy's quiet supremacy. It was not the recognition that defined him, but the lasting impact of his intelligence and foresight. The millionaire, now fully humbled, approached the boy cautiously, his expression a mixture of respect, awe, and lingering disbelief. I never thought I'd see someone like you," he admitted, voice low and honest. "You've changed everything I believed about power, intelligence, and myself." The boy's gaze was calm, almost serene, as he acknowledged the admission with a slight nod. No arrogance, no gloating, only understanding and quiet affirmation. The boy's inner voice reflected on the journey that had begun with mockery in a restaurant and had grown into global impact. Every challenge, every doubt, every underestimation was part of the path. True influence is quiet, true mastery is deliberate, and respect is earned, not demanded. The world sees now what cannot be denied, and it will never be the same. As the night deepened, the boy walked through the city streets, leaving subtle but profound effects in his wake. Each step, each observation, each small intervention carried weight beyond the immediate moment. The millionaire, once the symbol of arrogance, remained humbled, a witness to the quiet brilliance that had reshaped everything he thought he knew. And in the quiet of the night, the boy understood the final truth of his journey, that intelligence, patience, and insight, combined with calm mastery, could change the world far more profoundly than wealth, power, or loud assertion ever could. The world had seen, and it had learned. Silence surrounded him, but in that silence was absolute authority, the quiet supremacy of a mind that could never be underestimated again. Weeks turned into months, and the boy's influence had become tangible across every community he had touched. Businesses thrived, cities became more efficient, educational systems flourished, and even the smallest decisions were subtly improved by the ripple of his intelligence. His interventions were quiet, deliberate, and far-reaching, proof that mastery was not about recognition, but about enduring impact. The millionaire, once the loudest presence in every room, now observed from the sidelines. He had learned, painfully and irrevocably, that arrogance and wealth were no match for intelligence and strategy. He had attempted to assert dominance, offer bribes, and regain authority, but every effort had been neutralized, not through confrontation, but through the boy's precise, patient, and strategic actions. Humility, for him, had become a necessity rather than a choice. The boy, however, never sought credit. He understood that true influence was measured not by applause or titles, but by results. Communities operated more smoothly because he had guided them, systems improved because he had calculated the best course of action, and individuals were inspired because they witnessed intelligence and patience triumph over arrogance and mockery. His subtle presence reshaped the world in ways that would last far longer than temporary recognition. One day, the millionaire approached the boy with a sincere question, his tone quiet and reflective. How did you do all of this? How did you change everything without even trying to show off?" The boy's calm gaze met his, serene and deliberate. "I didn't do it for recognition," he said softly. "I did it because it needed to be done. Intelligence, patience, and understanding always find their way. Those who act without foresight are humbled by those who think carefully." The millionaire nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of the lesson. For the first time, he felt true respect, an acknowledgement that he could never achieve what the boy had accomplished, not through wealth, influence, or arrogance. Every laugh, every dismissive glance, every mocking word he had once directed at the boy, had been transformed into a lesson in humility that he would carry forever. The waitress, watching from a distance, smiled quietly. She had seen the boy's journey from the first moment, from ridicule to triumph, and now from local influence to global impact. "He's changed everything," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Not because he wanted recognition, but because he was brilliant, patient, and unstoppable. Her words reflected the truth. Influence is earned through action, not claimed through ego. Across the world, small communities, educational systems, and businesses continued to benefit from his subtle guidance. The boy's calm authority became a model, inspiring others to think, observe, and act deliberately. His story spread further, not as a tale of fame, but as a lesson in intelligence, patience, and strategic mastery. The millionaire, once the loudest and most arrogant figure in the room, now understood a final humbling truth. The world belongs not to those who boast, but to those who quietly master themselves and their actions. And the boy, calm and composed as ever, continued his journey, not seeking accolades, not demanding respect, but quietly shaping outcomes with intelligence, foresight, and precision. As the sun set over the city, the boy walked through the streets, leaving traces of brilliance in his wake. The world had learned, and it would never forget. Mockery can be overcome, arrogance humbled, and true mastery, quiet, deliberate, and intelligent, commands respect far beyond wealth, power, or noise. The lesson was complete. The boy had transformed the world, and everyone who witnessed his journey knew it. In the weeks following the global acknowledgement of the boy's brilliance, the world began to feel the human impact of his actions. Communities operated more harmoniously, businesses flourished, and educational institutions nurtured a new generation of thinkers inspired by his subtle guidance. Yet it was not just systems that had been transformed, it was people. The millionaire, once loud, arrogant, and dismissive, now carried a quiet humility that had been forged through repeated lessons. He approached each day with careful thought, reconsidering every assumption, every decision, and every interaction. The boy's influence had changed him not by force or intimidation, but through a revelation of what true mastery looks like. His laughter at the boy's perceived weakness had become a permanent reminder. Arrogance blinds, and intelligence commands respect. The waitress, who had witnessed the very first confrontation, now felt a deep sense of awe and inspiration. She had seen the boy move from a mocked child in a restaurant to a figure whose calm intelligence reshaped entire systems. Watching him interact with people and guide solutions quietly, she realized that the greatest power was not loud or aggressive, it was deliberate, precise, and rooted in understanding. She knew that she, and countless others, had been given a rare lesson in true leadership and quiet influence. The boy himself remained composed. Fame, recognition, and accolades were irrelevant. What mattered was the enduring effect of his actions. Every calculation, every intervention, every subtle nudge had a purpose, to change outcomes for the better. And in doing so, he had transformed not only systems and institutions, but hearts and minds. Children now looked up to him, not with envy, but with admiration and curiosity. Adults sought his guidance not to challenge him, but to learn from him. The world had begun to understand a profound truth. Influence is earned through patience, observation, and intelligent action, not through arrogance or wealth. Even those who had initially mocked or doubted him felt the change. Their perspectives had shifted, not merely because they had witnessed brilliance, but because they had been part of a story that redefined expectations. Lessons once hard-earned in humiliation became enduring wisdom. Humility replaced pride, respect replaced disdain, and understanding replaced skepticism. The boy's final reflection on his journey was quiet, almost imperceptible. The world can mock, doubt, and underestimate. Yet every insult, every disbelief, every challenge is an opportunity to show patience, intelligence, and foresight. Influence is earned, mastery is proven, and respect is cultivated, not demanded. In the stillness of the evening, the millionaire approached the boy once more. "I understand now," he said, voice low and sincere. "I was wrong to mock, to assume, to think wealth was power. You've shown me what true mastery is. I will never forget it." The boy nodded calmly, accepting the acknowledgement without pride, without boasting. The waitress, watching quietly, whispered to herself, "He's not just brilliant, he's changed the way the world sees itself." The boy walked into the night, his influence spreading quietly yet irrevocably. Systems improved, individuals were inspired, and communities flourished, all without fanfare, all without seeking recognition. His journey from ridicule to global influence had left an indelible mark, a reminder that true brilliance is quiet, deliberate, and transformative. And in the hearts and minds of all who had witnessed him, one truth remained clear. Underestimation can be dangerous, arrogance can be humbling, and the quiet mind, when focused and deliberate, can change the world forever. Time passed, and the boy's presence, though quiet, became an unspoken standard of excellence and wisdom. He was no longer just a child who had been mocked in a restaurant. He had become a symbol, a testament to what intelligence, patience, and foresight could achieve when applied deliberately. The world had changed, subtly yet profoundly, and people carried the lessons he had demonstrated in every decision and every interaction. The millionaire, forever altered by his experience, had become a student of humility. No longer the brash figure who laughed at perceived weakness, he now approached life and business with thoughtfulness and respect. He sought counsel, observed patterns, and reconsidered every assumption. The boy's influence had reshaped not just his understanding of others, but his understanding of himself. Every arrogant thought had been replaced with reflection, every dismissive glance with careful observation. The waitress, who had once silently witnessed the cruel laughter in the restaurant, now smiled with quiet pride. She saw the boy walk through the city streets, subtly guiding outcomes, inspiring change, and transforming systems without fanfare. The journey from ridicule to mastery had not only reshaped the world but had touched the hearts of those who had watched closely. Even the skeptics, who had doubted and challenged him repeatedly, had learned a lesson they could never forget. Brilliance combined with patience and strategic action cannot be denied. Attempts to mock, undermine, or compete were rendered powerless by foresight, calculation, and calm mastery. The boy himself remained humble. Fame had never been the goal, and recognition was irrelevant. His true satisfaction came from observing the changes ripple outward, communities flourishing, individuals empowered, and systems operating more smoothly than ever. Each small intervention, carefully calculated and patiently executed, had become a lasting testament to what could be achieved through intelligence applied with deliberate care. One quiet evening, the millionaire approached the boy one final time, no longer seeking attention or power, but understanding. "You've changed the world," he said softly, his voice heavy with sincerity. "Not through money, not through force, but through thought, patience, and understanding. I've learned more from you than I could have imagined." The boy nodded, calm and composed. True influence is earned, not claimed. Mastery is proven through action, not words. Those who think only of status and presence will always be humbled by patience and foresight. The millionaire smiled, genuinely and humbly. For the first time, he felt that sense of awe without embarrassment, an acknowledgement that he had witnessed something far beyond his understanding yet deeply transformative. The city around them carried the quiet echoes of the boy's impact. Systems were improved, people inspired, and decisions influenced with a subtle precision that few would ever trace back to him. His journey from mockery to mastery had reached its full circle, the lesson was complete, the influence undeniable, and the world forever changed. As he walked into the night, the boy's presence remained unassuming yet powerful. The quiet supremacy he had achieved was absolute. Wealth, arrogance, and loud displays of power paled in comparison to intelligence, patience, and strategic mastery applied with precision. And in that quiet authority, one truth was clear to all who had observed his journey. Underestimation is dangerous, arrogance is fleeting, and true brilliance leaves a legacy that endures forever. The world would remember the boy, not as a prodigy seeking fame, but as a force of quiet mastery who had reshaped perceptions, systems, and hearts. The lessons he imparted would echo through generations: respect intelligence, value patience, and never underestimate the quiet mind. The city had quieted for the night, yet the boy's influence remained palpable. Streets, schools, offices, and homes all carried the subtle marks of his guidance. People worked more efficiently, collaborated more thoughtfully, and approached challenges with patience and insight they had once thought impossible. What had begun as a personal confrontation in a restaurant had grown into a legacy of transformation, silent, deliberate, and undeniable. The millionaire, once the loudest voice in the room, now sat in reflection. He understood the depth of his own arrogance and the value of true mastery. Wealth and status were trivial in comparison to intelligence applied with strategy and foresight. He no longer sought to compete or assert dominance. He had learned the most valuable lesson of all: humility and observation are more powerful than arrogance and noise. The waitress, standing quietly on a nearby street, watched the boy pass by. She had been there from the very beginning, witnessing ridicule, laughter, doubt, and ultimately, triumph. She realized that what she had observed was not just brilliance, it was a blueprint for life. Intelligence tempered with patience, foresight, and calm execution could change not only outcomes but the very way people perceived the world around them. The boy himself reflected on the journey. Every insult, every moment of doubt, every challenge had been a piece of a larger puzzle. And now, with the world subtly reshaped by his quiet mastery, he understood a simple truth: true power does not seek recognition, true influence is earned, and true respect is cultivated through action, patience, and intelligence. He walked through the city streets, observing small details: a child helping another with homework, a business owner implementing a more efficient system, a teacher encouraging a student's creativity. These moments, small yet significant, were the living proof of the boy's enduring influence. They showed that transformation was not about spectacle or acknowledgement, but about the lasting impact of thought and action. The millionaire approached one last time, quietly and humbly. "I see it now," he said softly. "I see how everything I believed about power, intelligence, and respect was wrong. You've taught me everything." The boy nodded, serene, understanding the weight of the moment. No pride, no arrogance, only the quiet acknowledgement of a journey completed. The world, though unaware of every detail of his actions, had been changed. Leaders acted with more foresight. Communities collaborated more thoughtfully. Individuals carried lessons in patience and intelligence they had learned indirectly, from observing results rather than being told what to do. The boy's quiet mastery had become a guiding principle without ever demanding recognition. And as he walked into the darkness, leaving only the faint echoes of his presence, one undeniable truth remained: mockery can be overcome, arrogance humbled, and brilliance, when applied with patience, strategy, and calm authority, can reshape the world in ways that endure forever. The city slept, but the legacy of a child once underestimated, now quietly supreme, would live on. And those who had witnessed him, even in passing, would never forget the lesson he had silently, brilliantly taught: true mastery is quiet, deliberate, and transformative, and it leaves a mark that wealth, status, and arrogance could never achieve. The night embraced him, but his influence remained, eternal and unshakable, a reminder that the quiet mind, when sharpened with intelligence and patience, is more powerful than any voice raised in mockery.